The rain was relentless that night, a steady drumming against the roof turning the streets into glistening rivers of reflected light. I always found something soothing about the sound of rain, the way it blurred the edges off the world and made everything feel quieter, more intimate. But that night the rain felt different, like a backdrop to something G wasn't prepared for. I was standing in my kitchen upset mindlessly, trying the dishes when doorbell rang. It was late, too late for unexpected visitors. My husband Mark had left earlier in the evening for a weekend business retreat, so I was home alone. A flicker of unease passed through, but when I peered through the PO, I let out a relieved breath. It was Adam, Mark's best friend. Adam had been a part of our lives for nearly 2 decades. He and Mark had met in college and had been inseparable ever since. He was a fixture at our barbecues, family gatherings, and game nights. If there was anyone I could trust showing up unannounced this late, it was him. But something about the way he stood under the porch light, rain dripping from his dark hair, sent a ripple of curiosity through me. I pulled the door open. Adam, what are you doing here? His expression was guarded, but his blue eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. I didn't mean to just drop you, he said, shoving his hands into the pockets of his damp jacket, but I was driving home. And he trailed off, his jaw tightening. I needed to talk to someone. There was an unfamiliar weight to his voice, something uncharacteristically Lily was usually the life of the part-type guy with the quick jokes, the easy charms. Seeing him like this, uncertain and desolate, made Nini, see, come in, I said, stepping aside. He hesitated for just a second before stepping inside as he shrugged off his jacket. He noticed the way his shoulders saved slightly, as if he was carrying something. Evie, let me get you a towel, I offered, heading toward the hallway closet. When I returned, he was standing in the living room, staring at the rain spattered window, lost in thought. I handed him Fettuel, and he murmured a quiet thanks bar, running it through his damp hair. You want some coffee? I asked, trying to ease whatever tension was in the air. He nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen, grateful for something to do. Asked. Coffee breathed the air between, felt thick with something unspoken. I wasn't sure if I should pry or wait for him to speak first. Finally, as I set a mug in front of him, he exhaled sharply. I've been keeping something inside for a long time, he said, his fingers tightening around the ceramic hand. I don't think I can anymore. I sat across from him, my stomach tightening. What is it? He hesitated, staring into his coffee like it held things words he was searching for. Then, in a almost broken voice, he said, I'm in love with you. CLA. The words settled between us like a thunderclap, even though the only sound in the room was rain. I blinked, my breath catching in me throat. Of all the things I had expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. For a moment I thought maybe I had misheard him, that maybe the storm outside had distorted his words, but the way he looked at me, raw and guarded, left no room for misinterpretation. Adam, I started, but I didn't even know what I meant to say. No, he cut in, shaking his head. I know how this sounds, I know what this means, but I can't pretend anymore. I felt the heat rise to my fascia, a mix of shock and something else ebbing. I didn't want to name it. Him had always been Mark's best friend, had always been my friend too, but I had never considered, had never even allowed myself talk inside or anything beyond that. You've been drinking, I said, searching for some kind of explanation. He let out a humorless laugh. No, I wish I could blame it on that. I wish this was something I could shrug off tomorrow, but it's not. It's real, Clyde. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping the edge of the high table. Adam, you can't say things like that. I have to, he said, leaning forward. Bess, it's the truth, and I don't expect anything from you. I swear I don't, but I needed you to know, because the pretending doesn't make it any less real. I shook my head, my pulse peace sounding in my ears. This was too much too sudden. Marriage wasn't perfect, but Mark and Dee had built a life together. We had a story, memories, a foundation. Adam's confession, 3 to netto. Shake all of it. I took a deep breath. I don't know what you expect me to say. Don't expect anything, he admit, but I couldn't keep it in anymore. The air between us was charmed dead heavy with something inside. I could see the longing in high sighs, the quiet desperation of someone who had on to something for too long. In that moment, I felt something stir inside me, an echo of a feeling I hadn't let myself acknowledge before. But acknowledging it would change everything. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. The silence between you stretched thick and Dune yielding. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, and the rain still relentless against the windows. I felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room, my mind scrambling to process what Adam had just confessed. I shouldn't have said anything, muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. Probably ruined everything. I shook my head slowly. Though wasn't even sure what I was denning his words, the truth behind them, or the effect they were having on me. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might break through my ribs. No, I whispered, you haven't ruined anything. His gaze snapped up, searching me face, then say something anything. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Damn, you're my husband's best friend you've been in our lives for so long. I never thought you felt this way. He let out a low, humorless chuckle. That's because I never let you see it. I buried it for years too. You know how hard that's been. His voice was quiet but full of emotion, his fingers gripping coffee mug like it was the all-enliven keeping him steady. I had no idea how to respond. My instinct was to tell him he was wrong, that what he felt was misplaced, but that will be a lie. I had seen the way he looked at me, sometimes longer than necessary. As if he were memorizing me, I had just never allowed myself to question it. I exhaled slow at him. I love Mark. I know he smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's why I never said anything. That's why I told myself I could live with it, but lately... Claire, I didn't know it's getting harder. I pressed my fingers to my temple, trying to think clearly. Why no, why till midnight? He hesitated, then sighed. Because I saw you at the grocery store earlier today. You were laughing at something the cashier said. And for just a second, you looked so happy, and I thought to myself, what if that had been me life? What if I had told her sooner? I felt something tighten in my chest. Adam had whispered. He gave me a sad smile. I know it's selfish, and I don't expect you to feel the same way, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed you to talk now. I stared at him, my emotions warring inside. Part of me wanted to shut this down, to tell him we could never talk about this again. But another part of that part that was buried deep, the part I never acknowledged, felt something stir, a memory surfacey done bitten years ago. Before Mark and I had married, Adam and I had shared a moment, brief, fleeting but real. It was during one of those summer nights when we were younger, before life had settled in our routines and responsibilities. Mark had left the party early, and Adam and I had stayed behind talking for hours on that birch swing, the air thick with something unspoken. Nothing had happened, nothing was ever said, but I remembered the way he had looked at me that night. Had I even anything back then? Had I buried something just as he had? I shook my head as if trying to shake off the weight of my own thoughts. Damn, this is a lot to take in. I know. He stood abruptly, running hand through his hair. I should go. I didn't stop him. He grabbed his jacket and walked to the door, but just as he reached for the handle, he turned back. I meant what I said, Claire, and no matter what happens, I'll always be here, even if it's just as a friend. I swallowed hard, nodding good night. Adam, he hesitated for just a fraction of a second before opening the door and stepping into the rain. I stood there for a long time after left, staring at the closed door, my heart still racing, and I knew deep down I would never be able to forget what he had said. He barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Adam's words were playing in my mind like an echo. I couldn't silence. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed you to talk now. I told myself it didn't change anything. I was married to Mark, and we had built a life together, solid, steady, and familiar. But even as I tried to convince myself, a part of me knew that things wouldn't be the same. After tonight, by morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind damp streets and the crisp scent of fresh rain in the air. Mark was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee and his laptop open in front of him. Morning, Hesed without looking at morning. My voice was hurrah, and I wondered if he could hear the exhaustion in it. I busied myself making coffee, avoiding his gasmy hands were steady, but inside I felt shaken. Should I tell him all that make it easier? As I poured my coffee, Mark finally looked up, his brow furrowed slightly. You okay? I forced a small smile at you. Just didn't sleep well. He nodded, already distracted by his emails. It was a typical routine, and yet for the first time it felt like there was a wall between us, one that hadn't been there before. And I hated that I spent the rest of the day trying to push Adam's confession to the back of my mind. I answered emails, even called a friend, just to hear a familiar voice, but no matter what I did, my thoughts kept drifting back to last night, the way Adam had looked at me, the weight in his voice, the way my heart had reacted despite myself. By late afternoon, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. He grabbed my phone and hesitated for a long moment before finally typing a message. Can we talk? The three little dots appeared immediately. Then his reply came. Adam, of course. When and where? I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Meeting him felt like crossing a line, but I also knew I couldn't leave things unresolved. The park 6. Adam, I'll be there. The park Waski. When I arrived, the rain had left. Air cool and crisp, the grass still damp beneath my shoes. I spotted Adam near a bench, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his expression unreadable. As I approached, he offered a small tentative smile. Hey, I sat down beside him, keeping a care of distance between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched heavy and dunk. Then I took a deep breath. Adam, I didn't know what to say. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the small pond in front of us. I see it. I looked down at my hands. Y'all caught me off guard last night. I mean, I had no idea. I never wanted you to let out a quiet sigh. I never planned to say anything clear, but when I did, it felt like I could finally breathe after. Years off holding Aiton, I turned toward him, searching his fists. Why now, though? Why not before Markand? I got married, why not when it could have made a difference? His lips pressed into a thin line, because back then I thought I could handle it. I thought I could be your friend and nothing more, but over time it got harder, and Lily, I don't know, maybe it's selfish, but I couldn't keep pretending. I closed my eyes for a moment too. No, this changes things, right? He nodded. I know. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Adam, I love my husband, he exhaled softly. I know, and I can't. I won't do anything to hurt him. He gave me a sad smile. I never asked Guido. I looked away, my heart heaving. Then where does that leave us? He was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. That's up to you, Clara. I wanted to tell him that nothing had changed, that we could go back to the way things were before. But deep down I knew that was Allie, because something had changed. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew that after tonight I would never look at Adam the same way again, and that terrified me. I drove home on silence, the weight of the conversation with Adam pressing on my chest like a heavy stone. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, sadness, and something goals I wasn't ready to on me. I had spent years thinking I knew where I stood in my life, in my marriage, in my friendships, but tonight had shaken the foundation of everything. I felt wassertain by the time I pulled into the driveway. The sky darkened and the house was glowing softly from the lights inside. Mark was home. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The familiar scent of his cologne lingered in the air, and the sound of the television played from the living room. He was sitting on the couch, relaxed, a beer in his hand. He said, glancing up at me, "Where were you?" Question was casual, but I felt a flicker of unease. I had nothing to hide, and yet it hesitated. I went for a walk in the park. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Mark nodded, not thinking much of it. Long day. I exhaled. Yeah, he patted the couch beside him. Come sit with me. I walked over and sat down, feeling the warmth of his presence next to me. For a moment we just sat there, the sound of the TV filling the space between us, and that's when it hit. Miss Us was real. This was the life I had built, the man I had chosen, and despite everything that had happened in the last 24 hours, despite the unexpected emotions that had stirred something deep inside me, this was the only place I wanted to be. I turned to Mark, studying lines of his face, the way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration as he watched the screen. I had spent so many years beside him, and yet tonight I felt like I was truly seeing him again. He must have sensed my stare, because he turned his head, raising an eyebrow. I smiled softly. Nothing, just I love you. His expression shifted, surprised at the sudden tenderness in my voice. Then his features softened, and he reached for my hand. I love you too, Claire. I leaned my head against his shoulder, closing my eyes. Whatever had happened with Adam, whatever feelings had surfaced, didn't change the fact that my heart already belonged to me on, and that was enough. A week later, Adam left town for a work project overseas. He sent me a short message before he left. Adam, take care, Claire. Always be here if you need me. Stared at the message for a long time before finally replying me, you too, Adam. I didn't know if things would ever fully go back to how they were before. But maybe that was okay. Life had a way of surprising us, off testing the strength of the choices we made, and in the end, it wasn't about the words left unspoken or the roads not akin. It was about the love we chose every single day. The end.